From New York and on the new Hot 97 app, Ebro in the morning on Hot 97.
T-Bro in the morning, the amazing Laura Stiles, and the not paying attention Rosenberg. What's happening?
Well, I want to be able to do my research here.
Oh, raise the age research.
Yeah, I'm not going to come in here blind.
Well, we have Jim and Dana. Jim, how you doing, sir?
I'm doing great.
Jim St. Germain, his book, A Stone of Hope, a memoir about a life of a teenage kid, or really an 11-year-old, left by your parents, right? Foster kid?
Yep. Well, not foster kids, but my dad, my mother left me at a very young age. My dad was very abusive and dealing with drugs.
Mom left,
and
she had
alcohol.
drug problems?
Well, no, actually, Dad had drugs problem. Mom left because Dad was beating her.
Got it.
And she's like, you know what, I'm not taking this. So she left the four of us with Dad, and Dad had to kind of make things happen on his own. And that was back in Haiti. And then we moved here at 11 to the States, and I was expecting sort of like Home Alone kind of environment, but I got the wire.
Isn't that
instead.
crazy?
Yeah.
Wait, where are you from?
I was born in Haiti.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm Haitian. First black independent nation on earth.
Talk about it.
Not an S-hole country, I promise you that.
It's not a shithole.
Not at all.
It's
Not at all.
It felt too.
Well, that's
it felt too obligatory, but now that you gave us that much,
Oh, yeah. Not bullet.
So, Ebro, I met Dana recently
And
because
then Dana also. I didn't get a chance to introduce Dana.
Dana is amazing, and she's doing something really wonderful. She has a program called NYC Together, and Dana and I met through a friend of mine who's an incredible photographer, Sue Kwan, and she has the program NYC Together, where she builds these like safe spaces in precincts with children and develops these great relationships with the cops and the kids. And the workshop that I'm working with her next and is going to be focused on literacy. And you can talk a little bit more about the program.
Yeah, well, basically the program is meant to interrupt the school to prison pipeline by positioning police officers to be part of the solution instead of the problem for young people. So oftentimes there's a problem in the school calls the police, they come, and then there's an arrest made, which goes directly into raise the age and the issues around that. So what we're saying is that could be a moment of opportunity where we could actually level up and manage up to the police and say, okay, we're community policing, we're looking for innovative solutions. Here's the moment, right? Here's this young person that's experiencing a problem, a social problem. How could we provide a social solution versus a criminal solution? So while we're helping the young person and helping them avoid further involvement in the justice system or whatever kind of punitive punishment they might get from the school, we're also teaching the officers that there can be other things in their tool belt. And the young people are taking on the responsibility of teaching these officers system intelligence and emotional intelligence, which I have to say is huge. They are my heroes for doing that.
Is the NYPD supporting you?
Absolutely.
The reason I ask is because I believe that the culture of policing and the lack of empathy and desire to want to understand starts at the academy level. Right, and unless we have full support from the commissioner, police unions, right? Because a lot of these police, as we've known, but now information is becoming available to us about how much police officers aren't disciplined or are not losing their jobs no matter their behavior because they're protected by the police unions. If we don't have support and a desire to change culture of policing, and we're specifically talking about New York City, which I believe that James O'Neill, the new commissioner, are taking steps, which is why we're getting this information, right? That's my belief, because this information's coming out because he can't just outright say, here, this police officer's a problem, this police officer's a problem, et cetera, et cetera. But what can happen is over time we can learn about the history and the culture of policing, and then us as citizens can hold them accountable. If they're not supporting you, then we're not going to make the inroads that we want to make.
I think that's a really great point. And so two things. One, I think that in the academy, everybody should have to read Mark Lamont Hill's Nobody to understand the history of policing. But two, I just want to paint a picture to you. 10 years ago when I started my career in criminal justice reform, I was with police officers and I said, what does success look like to you? What does it feel like? What's a good day? They all said collars, like arrests. That was success, that we measure success with collars. Yesterday, I was with my new team in the 2-5 in Spanish Harlem under the leadership of Chief Harrison, who's the new chief of patrol. And I said to the officers,
we know Chief Harrison, don't we? He wasn't it was
he might have been.
Mahoney was before. What was the man's name before he got bumped up?
Maybe not.
You're thinking of Chief Monahan, who's now chief of department.
But he got moved.
And then Chief Harrison is the chief of patrol. And so
I think we know
yesterday, when I was with my officers in the 2-5, I said, what does success look like? I always ask my new officers that. What does success look like to you? And one of the officers, they all had great answers, but one of them specifically said, a day that I don't have to arrest a young person. And so the fact that we're seeing that shift in mentality is really telling. And my program started 3 years ago before neighborhood policing was a thing, under the leadership of Chief Madry, who has shown leadership around how to create culture shift, how to change hearts and minds. It's there. We're not perfect. There's a lot of problems still, but the culture is changing, and that's indicative of these answers that I'm hearing.
Well, and I think also, and not to cut you off, I think also for the audience to understand how, I guess, voters, taxpayers evaluate their mayor, their sheriffs, these voted positions, right? These voted in positions. I think it was around getting the criminals off the streets before, right?
And what is a criminal?
And what is a criminal, right?
Right.
And then I think the shift that I hopefully we will see, and not just in New York City, but Jersey, Connecticut, tri-state, the country, will be more about how are we changing people's lives and enabling them to participate in a useful way in society, so that crime rates drop, because people just, that's not the life they want to choose.
Right. I like to tell people that I've never met a person who wanted to do bad. Yeah. I've met people who felt like they had no other options than they just ended up doing things perhaps that cost society. But I think we're at a point now where we have to start looking at public safety as a whole, right? Not just, as you said, locking people up, putting away the keys, but all of us have to be a part of the solution. So one of the answers to that is police officers themselves stepping up, calling out some of the things they feel like are unfair or not right within the police department. So one of my homeboys, Edwin Raymond, who is a part of the NYPD 9, he's been here a few times. That's exactly what he's doing. Right? So he's putting his life, his career, everything on the line, saying, look, you have a quota system here. You're incentivizing police officers going out arresting people.
Now, Officer Raymond is still on the force.
He's still on the force and battling a lot of things, but...
And I hear internally police officers come after him.
Oh, man, his life, he's received death threats and all sorts of things.
Wow.
And, I mean, Edwin and I grew up together. He's in the book.
Okay.
I've known him since I was 11 years old. And, you know, we talked about the phone calls and the emails, people writing him, especially when most of the heat came, believe it or not, when he stood up for Colin Kaepernick, when they did that press conference under the Brooklyn Bridge. Prior to that, he was getting threats, but after that, man, it was crazy. Like, it was at a point where he was... Well, you know, things were getting serious. So
in the other world in which I occupy, in the sports talk world, I found that my defense of Colin Kaepernick took a lot of people who support the police. They were very hung up on the Colin Kaepernick sock thing. That was the pig sock.
The pig
thing
socks.
Right, man, I remember that.
I believe I hear it all. I'm like, I didn't even know in the other world. I didn't hear people even mention that part of it. But to some people, that was very impactful.
But Rosenberg, those same individuals, though, will never point out the very same issues Colin Kaepernick was highlighting.
Well,
like, they'll go right past there and say, oh, well, look at the socks.
Yep. Well, and they really hate me, because when the sock thing comes up, I'm kind of like, well, if the shoe fits, stop being fucking, stop being a fucking pig.
I also,
stop being an asshole.
I would also like challenge us to say that this is another issue where, or incident where we're putting things in boxes where we have to say it's either this or it's that. We say we either lock people up or we don't. Actually, no, there's a whole gray area here that needs to be explored.
Nuanced combo is not allowed.
How dare you,
in Trump's America.
I know.
We don't
don't get me started on what he did yesterday.
It's either wall or no wall.
No, it's wall or no country. He said we lose the whole country without the wall.
But so, in thinking about what you were talking about before, and something that I always talk about with my officers and my young people and community members is, how do we achieve safe communities? Because if you talk to a police officer, you can say, why did you become a police officer? I want to help people. You talk to the kids, what are police officers supposed to do? Keep the community safe. We know factually that in overuse of force and arresting everybody doesn't keep communities safe. If it did, Brownsville would be what, the safest community in all the world. So if we know that those things are facts, right? How can we encourage you? How do I elevate your social justice tenets to explore other ways to build safe communities? In collaboration, in partnership. How do we shift mindsets and break down the punishment paradigm or decarcerate America?
But we don't incentivize those things, though. We have to be honest, right? Like, if you talk to police officers, say, look, what is it that my job is? What are my job descriptions? They'll tell you that this is what my boss wants for me. 3
Yeah.
tickets a month, 2 arrests a month.
Well, because there's revenue tied to it.
That's
There's
exactly
an exact
right.
tied to
That's
revenue.
exactly right. It's
that's
literally
an
one of the
elected
way we bring
official
money to the
thing.
city.
That is an elected official thing, Jim, and I know that you know that that's an elected official thing that we need to be managing up and hold the elected officials responsible on the revenue side. But I would also push back.
Where does that come from? Sorry, real quick. When you say this,
Comes from the controller. It comes from
where is the revenue? Like, what does that money?
a ticket.
Oh, just to surely get the money paid. The
Right.
money that people spend. Got it. Okay, I'm stupid.
Yeah.
So
but
for example,
arrests.
sorry,
And
Lex,
arrests because
sorry.
the bail system.
That's
they wanna
exactly.
make
It's a
money.
business.
But
All of that. So for example, there was a
What is
study.
that? Who do you got to pay when you go in for your? You got to pay $25 for your, the little fee,
Processing or whatever.
processing fee or whatever. When they dismiss your ticket,
Yeah,
and they're
the
like,
court
you still
fees
got to
and
pay
stuff.
$25
Exactly.
though for coming in.
Right. They did some research on that. They actually found out that yearly in New York City alone, we generate about $1 billion off the backs of poor people. That's right. The people who actually have the least amount of money are the people we generate most of our funds on the backs of, right?
Squeeze a quick billion out of little fees here, little fees there.
That's-
We're helping you with this. We'll make you go away. You're so happy. You're not worried about $25. You just want to
You're
get
just
the fuck
trying to.
out.
That's exactly right. But you're not going to go on the Upper West Side and do that, right? Because you may encounter judges, lawyers, businessmen, people who have resources and power, and mostly upper class white folks, right? So where are you going to go for
again-
I
those
just
colleges?
call my
But where-
neighborhood specifically. But yes, continue. I agree.
But
I
then
hang out
where-
up there too. Don't
It's
worry.
great.
But that's why
Bagels
we
and
have
lox.
to put the onus of that on our elected officials that appoint somebody like a police commissioner that then it trickles down. There is a real trickle down.
I agree.
And so we have to understand the hamster wheel that we're all on, and the only way to get off of it is to be thoughtful about the boxes that we get put into and own that, right? And say, okay, I know that I am a part of this system, and how am I choosing to behave as a part of that?
Well, and also too, I think what ends up happening over time is $1 billion is not just gonna go away. You understand? So ain't nobody gonna be like, oh yeah, we're just not gonna make that billion this year. It's gonna come back in another way.
Of course.
Either they're gonna tax people more, right? You would hope that somebody puts some ingenuity into it and goes, oh, well, if we provide more people with jobs, there's more taxable revenue, which that you would think, you hope, but that's a
right.
long-term thing, and they want to make that billion right now.
Yeah, but go take that one further. If we're going to talk about dollars and cents, it costs over $100,000 a year to incarcerate a young person. Let's get into raise the age.
It's actually about 300,000 in New York State.
Okay, so, but how much do we spend to educate young people? How much is, what is it, 11,000,
Yeah,
12,000?
approximately $11,000 a year. So if you look at the
So
school
look at
districts,
the ROI there.
not
So
matching.
now, so let me take y'all a step further, and I say this. I've said it to Ava DuVernay, who did the 13th.
Yep.
If you 13, the movie. If you look at it, America has always found a way, which is why it's one of the most wealthy nations in the country, and we're going away from raise the age, which we'll get back to raise the age and how it's not.
But it's all
adequate.
connected too.
But it is all connected. Right. America will always find a way to get cheap labor so that the cost of the goods that we want to buy stays low in some degree, right? And you got people running around right now going, I want a higher minimum wage. Well, a higher minimum wage means that the goods will be higher and services will be higher because the people at the top, the executives, are not taking less money. Yeah. So the money's going to come from somewhere, and it's going to come from you, the consumer,
or
usually.
Or people will lose their job.
Or people will lose their jobs. And so in all of that, you hope that somebody provides some level of ingenuity, either the country, which I doubt will ever happen, will try to make CEOs and executives force them to make less money so that people who are actually doing the work can make more. Right. Then there's taxable revenue. And then maybe on the other side, there's some tax loophole that these companies and CEOs, but somehow, some way, somebody's going to get their money back at the top. And I think in a lot of these conversations, while we talk about the human element of it, what gets lost is the economic part of this, of people in America trying to be capitalists and make as much money as they're trying to make off of whoever they can take advantage of.
Right.
Well, not whoever.
That's exactly right. I think that,
really the low income and people who don't know that they're being taken advantage of.
But as Lyndon Johnson once said, right, he said, if you can convince the lowest white man that he is better than the best white man, you can pick his pocket all the time. He said, heck, he'll turn around and give you everything in his pocket. So race has been one of the tools used to make the machine go around, right? But Ibro, who's in power, who's in control of the very same issues you're referring to, who gets to sit at the table? the very same CEOs, and I mean, we're seeing it now, right? Now it's very blatant all in our faces. So I think that we have to be involved, right? You and I, and we have to educate the listeners, the people who are paying attention, those who need to be a part of this process.
As long as y'all not asking me to walk, my knee is bad. These marches, boys, my knee be hurting at the march, B.
We all can play a part.
That's why we invited you up there,
we all
because
can
it's
play a part.
important.
This is a huge part right here, right? You're giving us a platform.
This is huge, and also I think that the idea of people having dissecting things so that we're not in boxes.
Right.
That's what we need to start doing. Unpacking them and being honest, right? Like, as a white person, I have to be honest about things, right? And I have to be uncomfortable sometimes. And I have to take responsibility for that. And I'm willing to do that work because that's the least that I can do, right? And I have to manage up to my peers that look like me and invite them to do that too.
And you're a true American, right? A real American, in my opinion, a real patriot, is someone who is not afraid to talk about the horrors of our history and the damage we have done to the populations and ethnic groups and people who live in this country. Those are what real Americans are, right?
And if you're white and a real American, in my opinion, and I also say a real American, I also put in parentheses, cuck snowflake to describe myself, also willing to talk about how you as a white person, even though you're against it, benefit from it.
We talk about that all the time.
That's hard for people.
A lot of people can't. I was listening to an interview yesterday, Rosenberg. A gentleman said, I never had to worry about anyone else. He said, as a white heterosexual male, I've never had to worry about anyone else. It just hits me that has never been a part of my thought process.
And now we're seeing those same individuals that fit in the category you just described, because they're spoiled little brats, right? Acting out. Right, screaming, mad, walking in the street,
the Jews
trying
will
to
not replace us.
Exactly,
you know what I mean?
And
because they've never had to deal with anything
That's exactly
before.
right. The consequences is what you have now in office, right? It's like these people are coming in and taking our
spoiled
stuff
brats because they've never had to deal with real life.
The biggest difference, because a lot of people, it's very nuanced. The biggest difference between Jews and other people whose skin are light or white is that no Jew in America has not gone through the experience of hearing someone say that thing that you have to go and kind of look away from because it makes you uncomfortable because you know they're talking about you or people like you.
Right.
So all minority groups of any variety, if you're not essentially a WASP in America, has had that feeling of like, oh, I'm not really welcome here.
Right.
But if you've never had that, and by the way, I'll give them a little bit of credit in this regard. Being empathetic isn't easy.
No.
Right.
And not everybody on our side is empathetic.
Right.
And would do the same for other groups.
That's exactly
Let's
right.
be clear about it. Not everyone would.
I give you an example. I like to tell people this all the time. As a young black man, I'm 6 feet tall, 210 pounds. When I walk out of my door, I don't think of perhaps that I'm going to be sexually harassed today.
Right.
It's not a part of my thought process. But it doesn't mean that it's not happening to a young lady. So my job as a young man is to speak to other young brothers and saying, look, man, here's how we can do things better. Here's the things for us to be mindful of.
Exactly right.
Make that issue a part of my
It's like
issue.
we say on our show,
Right?
if you want to be understood, you got to start by understanding, right? And a lot of people don't start in the understanding someone else, position, because that's taking a higher road. That's more work.
It's exempt
Right.
too.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah, yeah.
And
Well,
by
and
the
it
way,
can't
you don't
even,
think- you
it's
don't-
never affected them.
And you don't think about the fact that when you came in here today, you're wearing a hat. And you look great in the hat.
Right.
But I got a hat like that, fits my head great. I'm too short to wear it.
Yeah,
you don't think about
You
that.
won't look as good as
It
me.
just won't look as good as you.
We gotta admit.
Let's take a minute and think
Yeah.
about it. Oh, that's hard for him.
Are you jealous of his hat?
Oh my God, it's just like the one I got.
It looks
Yeah, I know, but
great.
his hat looks phenomenal. Yours look like Darkwing Duck.
It was bad.
That's not right.
Yeah, I don't know if it was right.
Now, Jim, one of the conversations that we had with Dana is when we brought up raise the age, right?
Right.
And she was like, you have to meet Jim because he's so educated. He's an advocate, and he's gonna tell you what bullshit we're dealing with. And I want you to educate us on things that we should know about, because a lot of people are like, oh, we're good now. We're not part of the states. We're not part of the 2 states that that prosecute kids as young adults.
Right. So
young adults as adults.
Basically, you're saying the raise the age that got put through was kind of a sham.
Well, so I give you a little history real quick on why I got involved in Raise the Age. I was a young man, as stated earlier, who was involved in the system for 3 years. Growing up in Brooklyn, Crown Heights, pre-gentrification, life was hard. It was also on one side of the streets and the Hasidic Jews on the other side, completely 2 different roads. Rosenberg knows about that a little bit. And we did some horrible things based on the realities of our world in that sense, right? And so I started having run-ins with the law on a regular basis, ended up doing 3 years in the juvenile justice system. But what happened was I was 4 months shy of my 16th birthday. So although I had a D felony, I was sentenced to the juvenile justice system, where more services, help, rehabilitation was like the main focus. It wasn't perfect, but the chances I received in the juvenile justice system were much different than Rikers Island or the adult system. And so I went through that process, got some mentors, some great individuals, former attorneys, Marty, Christine, Walton, people who decided that I was worth an investment, invested in me, give me a chance, ended up going to college, graduating college, doing a lot of great things. And then the Khalif Browder case happened. I remember sitting at my desk at work, reading that article, and I felt guilty, like, man, how was this kid any different than the kid that I was? I was actually worse than him if you're looking at the behaviors. He was allegedly charged with stealing a backpack, which, I mean, that alone is just insane.
And it's alleged.
Exactly. Never convicted. Spent years in Rikers Island, was pretty much abused and went through everything. And I feel like the state actually killed him. The government killed him. Although he, kind of...
he was in solitary confinement for about a year.
Being abused, everything you could possibly think of. This kid had less right in a sense than folks who were at Guantanamo Bay. And so I remember reading that article feeling like, man, this is wrong. I got to do something. That's when I was like, you know what? I need to get involved in this Raise the Age campaign. So I've been at it for about 7 to 8 years. And each year we'll go to Albany and we'll get disappointed. And we keep pushing. Finally, last year, the process in the back room, I don't know if you guys ever been in the back room where legislations are like being
the negotiation. We've had several people up here. What was the Democratic people who was trying to be separate from the Democrats?
The IDC.
Yeah, we had some
Action step 1. If you live in a district with an IDC candidate, do not vote for them if you want progressive policies.
So the IDCs are what we call the Independent Democratic Caucus. So what happens is that it's a group of breakaway Democrats. They originally ran for office as Democrats, but then got to Albany and said, you know what? We're going to...
I can make more money.
With the
I can make more money staying close to these Republicans.
Frauds.
No, it's all about
the money.
America. It's not even that complicated anymore. It's all. I mean, it never was.
It was painted for us very clearly. Like that's
about money.
That's exactly right. Pretty much it. So what that did is it took power away from Democrats, because Democrats actually have the majority in the Senate.
Well, and you know
they
what
have
those
the
IDC?
Assembly.
I forget the guy we had up here, and you can go look for it on Hot 97.
Was it Jeff
Klein?
Nope. Black dude from Brooklyn.
Oh, Jesse Hamilton.
Yeah.
He's
Jesse
actually my
Hamilton.
senator. That's my senator, actually.
Jesse Hamilton was up here, and his response was, the people in my district like what I am doing for my district.
I'm from his district. That's not true. That is not true.
Well, that's what he said in his defense of being a part of the IDC, because obviously in his mind, he's getting more money funneled into his district and whatever those services are,
right?
That he's able to provide for those people.
Or future political opportunities for
right,
himself.
that's exactly right. But,
of course.
But at what expense, Ebro? Now, don't get me wrong.
At the expense of putting young people in jail, because it benefits the prison pipeline, which benefits the bail system,
Young
which
people
benefits
of color.
those cities upstate, that the whole city works at the jail.
That's exactly right. You know, the upstate economy was based off of prison.
Yeah.
Pretty much, right?
Yeah.
So
prison and farms. And
right.
And also, if we look back at the tapes when they were doing the debate on the floor over this, the assembly, and the things that were being said about the young people that we're specifically talking about were, you would have thought that we had kids that are mass murderers punching pregnant ladies in the face, and that's just not the case. We're talking about kids that are maybe stealing a
not saying
backpack,
that there aren't
maybe
those
getting caught,
cases.
and of
Right.
course,
But
and
those
of course,
are not the norm.
That's not the norm.
and that's also would never be considered for, like, if you're 13 and you do something like that, you're not going to be treated the same way.
Right.
But we're talking about kids like at the Hop 10 years ago, most of the kids that I was working with were getting caught with a bag of weed on them.
Right.
That's the kids that we're talking about. Kids doing kids stuff. Right? And let's
yeah, but you're not allowed to be a kid when you live in the inner city and you're black.
That's
You're only allowed to be a kid and do mischief when you live in the suburbs, you have some money, and you're white.
On the Upper West Side, right, Rosenberg?
Well, I don't know any kids there.
with the right in Rosenberg.
Well, by the way, I assume
I'm
he's
messing
right.
with him.
No,
he
I
doesn't
know
even
Chevy
know that.
Chase.
He doesn't
Chevy
even-
Chase, Maryland, which is like the Upper West Side.
Yeah, I
of
know.
Maryland.
Yeah, I know Chevy Chase.
It was very much mischief.
Right.
You could.
That's what kids do.
Like it's funny. My brother had a situation. I remember my brother when he was 15. They were walking up to lunch. We got to have free lunch, and he was walking past the soda machine, and the soda machine was busted open, so everyone was taking soda.
Right.
So my brother and his friend Carlton What up, Big Cack? Cack Butters. Him and Carlton grabbed sodas. And, of course, they were the last guys. And, of course, the cops came. My brother did go in. But my brother's treatment once he got in was completely different than Carlton's.
Well, we have two systems in America.
Because Carlton's black?
Yes.
Yeah, we have two systems in America.
And he ain't Carlton from Fresh Prince. He's Big Cat.
He's Big Cat.
We have a system that treats you better if you rich and guilty rather than innocent and poor, right?
Yeah,
that's what we
we've
have.
seen it.
That's what we have, right? You ask all of the people who knows about this, the Brian Stevenson of the world. That's what we have. So there was no surprise to me. I know a lot of my white friends all the time get treated differently for the same things that we do in our neighborhood, right? I mean, the numbers are out. Just recently, literally last week, the data's came out that 80% of the marijuana arrests in New York City right now are mostly black and brown people. And I can tell you for sure, white people smoke a lot
Well, here's
of
the
weed.
deal, and let's have a deeper conversation that we had on the air, right? Which is the NYPD's response to that is we're responding to the people making the phone calls.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
Now let's paint the entire picture. The entire part of that picture is the fact of, yes, black and brown people get picked on for the same crimes as white people, but also in our communities, we have elderly folks and old folks that just want to call the police on young people because of the generation gap and the lack of understanding.
Right, for sure.
Right? Then you have the religious component where people still today think that smoking weed is like doing heroin.
Yeah.
But also,
You know what I'm saying? So I saw those numbers and I was like, wait a minute. And then you have the fact that in suburbs, white people smoke weed in their house.
All
in
of that
their
is
car.
true. Yep.
Too often, black kids is walking down the street, sitting on the stoop, blocking the staircase, et cetera, et cetera. Just, you know what I mean? So there's other things in
Ibra,
there.
I agree 1,000%, but these are circumstances that a lot of the folks you're referring to were put into.
Yes.
Of course. Right? And the other thing is that,
But-
look, they have discretion, man. I see it all the time. Because if that happens again in certain neighborhoods, I have white friends who were doing certain things. The police come and said, all right, kid, get out of here. You know, throw that away, get out of here.
Yes.
So why can that discretion be available for young black and brown folks?
Because we
wait,
can
can I
make money off y'all.
But I just need to say one other thing, and not that I disagree with anything that's being said in this conversation, but I also want to, again, challenge everybody to think about shifting mindsets and shifting culture. And that's not just about the police, that's also about the community. And so I go to a lot of community meetings where the meeting starts off with a lot of stuff about the police and their behavior and things like that. And then by the end, and these are community meetings hosted by police officers. And then by the end of the meeting, it's like, I'll never forget, this just happened 2 weeks ago. A gentleman stood up and he said, you know, we have these boys on the corner. What are you doing about gang culture and this, that, and the other? And when we talk about tools and innovation and building safe communities, yes, the onus has to be on the police because they have badges and they have guns and we give them that authority. But the onus also has to be on us as community members. When you see boys that are standing on the corner, don't look at the police or call the police. He started a mentorship group, Plot Youth. So the idea is that the conversation needs to be centered around shifting culture. And how do we say that we are not going to be punitive anymore, but we are going to be restorative? We are going to be good community members by lifting people up, by changing our mindsets, by being innovative, by creating a bigger toolbox. And what does that look like?
I'll be honest, you know, and we should all be honest. Gangs is not new. Kids left without anything to do mischief.
Sure.
Pack
It's a
mentality.
recipe for disaster.
As they get older, they try to figure out ways to make money.
Jesse Hamilton should open up a youth center.
Right? But the piece in there is what often doesn't happen is someone tell these kids, you know, at 13, 14 years old, boys and girls are thinking about how they can get fresh, how they can hang out with their friends. Summer job programs, ways to make money is what keeps people out of trouble. But when they remove those opportunities for kids to make money,
which they always do,
then
guess what?
And you have
it's a double win for the bad guys.
Save
money on the programs, gain money from the press.
Yeah.
So we know the issues, right? As Dana mentioned, all of us have to be a part of the solution. Like one of the things I talk to about black folks all the time is, look, we can't be afraid of our kids. One of the things I do often is I walk up to young brothers randomly and just talk to them, right? Like I see a young brother on the train maybe selling something, but his pants is down there. I used to wear my pants down there, and I'm like, look, bro, this is not respectability politics. I'm not telling you that you can't have your pants how you think it's comfortable, but here's some jewels. Like, if you change a little something,
You
may
might
make more
welcome
money.
more people in.
That's
Right.
exactly right. Now, some people say, well, that's respectability politics. No, it's us understanding the system that we in and how we have to find a way to work within
you're
that.
asking people to be honest about their circumstances, right? Which is then if you want to make more money and be more approachable, your appearance plays into that, right? But a lot of times, even with the conversation we was having about weed and kids being able to be kids, I've found myself many mornings I love the work that you guys do, right? And I'm glad there are people doing it. But today and tomorrow and next month, right, a lot of the changes we're speaking of aren't going to happen. So when I'm speaking to families and young kids every morning, I'm like, yo, when you leave the house today, just know they are plotting against
That's
you.
exactly
so
right.
make the changes that you got to make sure that you get where you're trying to go.
We're playing chess, not checkers.
But
That's
I
a part
think
of what we have
and
to
I
do.
think that that's great that that's could be your role in this. But another thing I want to go back to is the empathy piece, and I think that Jim, what you talked about was an example of this. I remember again 10 years ago, the first time I ever did press about the work I was doing when I was with another organization. They said, you know, what are you doing here that gets the kids to show up? Because I'm working with all court-involved kids, and I said, well, I love them and I hug them. And I remember my organization saying to me, no, that's not evidence-based. You can't use that. And for 10 years, I've been loving and hugging my kids. Every time I talk to them, I tell them I love them and I hug them. And my officers mirror that behavior. They go to parent-teacher conferences. We show love, we work with love, we give love, and we get love back. And so the piece about empathy, and now we're seeing the police chief in Chicago, he's using that model. He's knocking on doors of people that are most at risk of gun violence. When they open the door, he says, I just want you to know I love you and we need you in this community. And so I think that
that's a little weird. I mean, you might want to, you know what I mean?
I think a very,
It's a little weird.
what Jim is saying.
What's really going on? I'm looking out the back window.
No, but like what Jim is saying is, and by the way, that's part of a ceasefire model, which used to be we're going to put a bunch of gang members in a room and yell at them and tell them you're either going to jail or you're ending up in a box. Now we're saying we love you and we need you in this community. And what Jim is saying about walking up to the young man on the subway, as a white person, something I do on the subway all the time is if I see young boys of color, I smile at them. I sit next to them, whatever it is, because I hear from kids in my program that say to me, Miss, how come when I get on the subway, white people walk to the other side of the car? So again, I think if we could take small acts of empathy and love and compassion every day, and this is not some hipster shit. Like, I can prove that this is working.
Love is real. Love is real.
But it's true because a lot of these kids don't get that love and compassion at home.
I was one of those kids. Ebro, as you know, as all of you guys know, the most dangerous person is a person with nothing to lose. We have a lot of hopeless young people out there. Society has written them off. Like, that's the truth. Let's think about what we do all the time. We get up. It's a busy city. We go out about a business. And a lot of people are suffering and going through stuff. We don't even stop sometimes to think about that. A lot of these young people don't have opportunities available to them. They live in a capitalist society that tells them that you're not shit if you don't have ABC. And then all of a sudden, we don't expect them to go out and find a way to get that.
Yeah.
It doesn't make sense. Like, that's logic. Like, we all just can think about that and see it.
A city filled with people who have nothing to lose is a
Dangerous city.
What?
So as a society, we have to give our young people something to lose. We need them. They're a part of the future. They're part of our solutions, right? Who are stronger than young black men and women? I don't know any group. We've been through everything you could possibly think of. But so we have to get them involved. If you don't have access to the economy, you pretty much fuck. I can say that word, right?
You did.
You just did.
It just happened.
Sorry.
Well, but also we have to give young people the tools to understand. Like we're doing, the cops and kids are doing financial literacy next Friday. We do financial literacy workshop series. We have to provide education because what we've been very good at is shielding young people from knowing the truth. When I get a young person in my program, I tell them, do you know that if you're suspended even one time, you're twice as likely not to graduate high school? You would be amazed what information and knowledge can do to a young person because they could be ignited by that and they could use that. So we need to be honest, we need to be empathetic, we need to be loving, and we need to use the lemons that society has given us and make lemonade. And that's what, we position these police officers to really be social justice heroes in this situation, to learn empathy so that they could use discretion so that we could build safe communities. And I'm going to applaud the police department in taking this step forward, right? We still have a marathon. There's a ton of space in front of us.
But they showed up.
But they showed up, and they're having the conversation. And I'm having conversations right now with commanding officers and police officers that 10 years ago would have gotten me kicked out, iced out, you know. And also when we talk about arming people with knowledge, so I tell my young people that when I do a lesson on the school to prison pipeline, you know who I talk about? I talk about Trayvon Martin. Again, let's not put things in boxes. Sure, we can give George Zimmerman all the credit for that murder, and that was horrible, and we cannot talk about anything other than saying that. But what we need to do, but what many people are not talking about is that Trayvon was suspended from school for 10 days because he had a screwdriver in his backpack. And if he didn't threaten anybody with it, nothing. He got caught with the screwdriver in his backpack, and they suspended him for 10 days. Mom and dad didn't want to leave him home doing nothing, so he went down with dad to where he was murdered. That was a boy that should have been at home going to school, but instead he was somewhere else because we said, okay, he's a boy with a black boy with a screwdriver in his backpack. We must be punitive. We must give him a 10-day suspension because that's going to do what? Teach him a lesson?
And who
that's going to change behavior?
Right.
I never even heard of that.
Right.
So, but now when I tell
as kids.
When I tell my police officers that, you should see their faces. They have no idea that narrative, right? And then we have the kids saying, oh, yeah, I've been suspended for 60 days for a bag of weed. And the cops are like, no way. And I'm like, exactly. We need to arm people with knowledge and information, and we need to use that to change our behavior and shift culture. That's what we need to be doing.
It's about who is it that you're caring for that you think deserve your humanity or empathy and all of the things that we need. Perfect example. When you look at Parkland, right? Horrible tragedy, 17 kids died, and it's a movement now. But Ebro and all of you guys in here, as you know, kids are dying on the south side of Chicago every day.
Brooklyn.
Right? Brownsville, you know, like it's happening.
South Bronx.
We don't see the same movement all the time. Again, that's why as a
furthermore,
society.
you've seen kids, moms, community activists, politicians for decades standing in front of cameras on the news, and nobody cared about the conversation around gun control, gun violence. And even furthermore, and let me not say nobody cared, because evidently those people cared, but the majority of the population of America wasn't stopping what they were doing, and like today, having a national school walkout.
But there are people, there's Save Our Streets, YSOS, and
Gangsters making astronomical changes.
And so we should be making donations. We should be outside walking with them. Every time there's a violent incident in Bed-Stuy or in Crown Heights or in South Bronx, those young people get up and they walk, and they go to the hospitals and say, don't retaliate. Where are we? Where are we in that conversation? Where are our dollars? Where is that? Where is Jesse Hamilton on that? Maybe he gives to that, and I hope that he does. But we need to be looking at where are elected officials putting dollars? Where are we putting our energy? Who are you guys inviting on your show? Who are we talking about on social media? Where are we donating? What are the events that we choose to show up to? Like, again, it's personal responsibility that we need to be a part of, because that's the only way to make this shift.
And it has to be solution-based, right? We know that, like you talked about something earlier regarding employment opportunities in summer youth. Right here in New York City, coming soon, 100,000 kids will be up looking for summer jobs. But we only have slots for about 40,000. That means you're going to have 60,000 young people roaming the streets this summer looking for an opportunity. Again, a recipe for disaster, right? Because we know in our adolescent mind, seeing all of this, you know, prosperity in front of them they can't touch, they don't have access to, because we know there's two worlds here, then what do you expect is going to happen? So not only arming them with the knowledge and information, holding the police department accountable and having them being a part of the solution, us as community members and leaders, you, Ebro, Rosenberg, Lois Stiles, like being mentors to young people, you know, pulling our young people to the side regardless of what they look like, where they're at, spitting some knowledge to them, giving them opportunities here, perhaps internships, whatever it may be, which I know y'all doing. Which I know y'all doing.
By the way, just so
I
you
know.
know.
I can already tell. But, you know, all of that has to be a part of the solution. That's what we need, because, you know, a lot of young people are hurting.
I think that's why we have these conversations and we continue to bring people on the program. And before it was cool, you know, I can say that our team here, whether it was Lisa Evers, you know, a lot of people don't, you know, talk about the fact that Street Soldiers is the longest running program on radio in the country, on a station, a mainstream station that still dedicates time and resources to having these conversations, right? I don't even think there's another radio station in the city. A lot of people don't know that it used to be a FCC mandate that you used to have a community services program.
Oh, this is now just by choice.
Yeah. Now it's by choice. Right. So you don't, like a lot of, if you show me the other community services programs that you guys know about in the city.
Yeah, I don't know of any other ones.
BLS and Hot 97.
Right.
And so that's why. So and you know, it is it feels great now that it's in style, right? To be an activist. You talk to talking to your mic. But yeah, no, people have been doing it for a long time, and but the reason I'm saying it is because now more than ever, you know, it feels great that media doesn't have to dodge these conversations, because it used to be like, yo, don't be too on your soapbox every day, because that doesn't get ratings.
1,000%, and we even seeing that right now in Hollywood as I'm, you know, dealing with some people there. They've actually realized that we can actually make money and tell, you know, stories that matters.
Yeah,
we got to thank for that though.
Black Panther.
Oh, well,
I think
that's
Ryan
not where I was
Coogler.
going. What's the exact opposite of Black Panther?
Harvey Weinstein.
Donald Trump.
Donald Trump.
You know what?
Harvey Weinstein close.
Sadly, he's close. But look, are everyone's collective fear?
I try to block him out of my mind.
Has opened our eyes.
Rosenberg, I'll tell you this: as a young black man, and I know you know this, Ebro, when he. First of all, I wasn't surprised that he won, right? Because if you look at the history of America, usually after something that seems black happens, you get a backlash.
Yeah,
right?
but you can't front. We can all act like we weren't surprised. I never thought the establishment would allow the bar to get set so low, and the intellectual
capacity, whatever.
His intellectual capacity, gravity, whatever, is so low that I never thought that they would allow that job to get the bar set. I never thought in my life that they would allow that.
Let me ask you a question. Let me ask you a question. Ebro, let's be honest. Do you think the average 70-something-year-old rich white guy is different from Donald Trump?
I think they're smarter intellectually, but they may have the same passions. They see themselves in here. They think, and because we heard it.
And they're not as loose. I just think they're not as loose.
That's exactly right. A lot of them are more politically inclined and correct.
They're intellectual.
But guess what? As you said, Rosenberg, in a strange way, you have to appreciate the fact that people who were comfortable 8 years ago now realizing that, like, look, I'm in this too. This is the first time in my lifetime, I'm 29 years old, where I've seen all people coming together, realizing like, oh shoot, who's next?
Oh no, I'm already on.
Right?
I've been on the. If we survive this, we will be a better country for it. I truly do believe that.
I hope so, and I think so. But we have to keep this going, right? Because as a nation,
surviving is the key.
We have a very sort of like short-term memory, right? So a lot of time things happen, we go through it, and next thing you know, we retreat back to our corners.
I'm gonna tell you what. Right. If everybody's bank accounts is looking the right way,
then we may have a problem.
There's no bottom for this guy. Like, there's literally no bottom. So it's very hard for me to even think about what we're going to be like when we get out of this, because the things that he, like, for example, yesterday, and going back to Raise the Age, like, he wants to undo Obama discipline policies.
These are things I worked on personally.
Like these are... and that's his response to the Parkland shooting. So, and we know that discipline policies in school disproportionately impact young people of color, disproportionately impact those with special needs. So your response to the Parkland shooting is, I'm going to undo the Obama discipline policies. Like, I can't imagine what the bottom is. There's no bottom here.
But that's his entire agenda.
And it took us a lifetime to get to where we were with Obama.
His entire agenda is to sort of like undo everything Obama did in the last 8 years. I was one of those.
But do we have 200 years to rebuild it? I don't know.
Well, but what I'm saying is that it's not new, right? It's not. Let's not act like Trump is new, right?
The Indians got slaughtered. How y'all feel about Wakanda?
Haiti. I think Haiti would be the next Wakanda, but we got to do some work.
Let's go. As long as the corruption in politics is all, we can have a whole Haiti discussion.
I know we got to fix that. But you know, as mentioned earlier, Laura Styles, is that we have to be knowledgeable and we have to stay committed, right? Because this can happen again. We've seen it.
Well, how can everyone keep up with what you guys are doing?
So, for me, you can find me online, Jim St. Germain, at Facebook, Instagram. My memoir, A Stone of Hope, is here.
Boom.
It's doing really well, and I highly suggest you pick a copy up before it becomes a movie. And Plot for Youth is our mentoring program. Plot for Youth stands for Preparing Leaders of Tomorrow. So what I realized worked for me as a young man was mentors, people stepping in my life at every juncture saying, look, I know you're going through this. I want to be here for you, and I'm not going to give up on you. And that allowed me to be the individual that I am today. So I started a nonprofit organization where I do the same thing for other young people. So we're currently mentoring young men in Brooklyn who are at risk or coming out of the juvenile justice system. The goal is to soon start doing the same for young women once we can expand and, you know, grow. But plotforyouth.org, we're looking for mentors. It's our biggest need. Like, we need brothers and sisters to step up. And when I say brothers, I mean even you, Rosenberg. Like, you can be a mentor.
Let's go.
You can give some.
I have some valuable things to offer.
No,
you
you do.
You know the word brother was, you know, it wasn't just black people didn't make that up, that word, you know.
But he knows it's implied.
Right.
Black people,
Actually-
we took brother.
No, you didn't take it. You didn't take it.
We
Actually.
own brother now.
Well, no, but hold on.
Yeah.
It's actually often flipped around and used as white code language for N-word,
Yeah.
in my opinion.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, the brothers,
Right.
It's like
It's just like thugs. That's the new N-word, by the way, too.
Yeah, but
Right.
brother would be like, yo, what's up, brother?
Right.
some
From a
people
white dude to say it to you.
Right. Yeah.
But by the way, see, it is weird though because I use brother a lot,
Right.
and I do now. I'm a little conscious.
See, my
call some
white
of my
brother,
white
I don't
friends
know what
brother.
he's saying to me sometimes. My white brother would be like, yo, what's up, brother?
and you're like, yo.
I'd be like, wait, you are my brother.
Oh, yeah, exactly.
I'm your brother. Yeah.
Dana, where can we find you?
So you could follow us on Instagram, which is nyctogether.org, and it looks very fluffy there. But if you subscribe to our newsletter, you'll see that the things that we're doing are really
What do you
about
mean
shift.
fluffy?
You know, it's pictures of cops and kids doing things together,
it's
and
warm and fuzzy.
but the thing is that we place ourselves right in the middle of policy change. So we're using the work that we're doing to really shift policy and to change culture and shift mindsets. And we're actually interrupting the school to prison pipeline because I could tell you all of the seniors in my program that have participated for a year or more have graduated high school. They're on to economic opportunities in college. So I encourage people to look at our Instagram. Please sign up for our newsletter on our website, nyctogether.org. And there's always great ways to be involved in the work
Can
that
you
we're
help
doing.
us also, too, because I know we do it every year, and we probably should go harder at it, but we do also try to give out information on the radio about where the jobs are for the kids every
We
summer.
can help with that.
Sure. We can some of
But
those.
getting all of the info, like we've asked the city hall to give us a
And-
list
and
of
here's-
things.
Get in touch with
And
us. We
here's-
can make
I'll
sure
send some of
we hit
those to
it.
you.
I know
Yeah.
that we're trying to wrap this up, but I just want to say one other thing. In all of this, we've talked about our roles and what are the roles to play. One part of this that I think, and we've talked about economic opportunity, but we left this out, which are the business owners that are in our community. The thing that I'm probably most proud of that we do at my organization is that we go to those companies that are in these rapidly gentrifying communities that are, you know, outpricing people as far as rent and things like that, and we say, hey, we have an opportunity for you.
Right.
And so they take kids that we have restaurants, hotels, law offices. My friend is a maker. She makes clothesline and label. Taking in kids. My kid, Jerome, I love him so much. He wanted to be a fashion designer. She taught him how to make patterns, how to sew, all of this stuff. And you know what? Every single one of those business owners have told me, this was such a gift to me and to my company. So let's manage up. If you know somebody that owns a company, like we were talking about the sneakers,
Yeah.
and if you know somebody that owns a company, take a kid in. I guarantee you're going to give that kid a lot, but that kid is going to give you and your staff so much more.
That's exactly
And
right.
so that's another thing when we talk about economic opportunity, let's not leave out the business owners who can hire local, who can engage young people in this important work of creating a better future for all of us and better communities. And I'll tell you, Gotan down in Tribeca hired one of my young people, Marquise. He then got his mother's boyfriend. They just had a baby together, the mother and the boyfriend, not him, and just got the mother's boyfriend a job at the same place. That changes the dynamic of that family.
Yep.
That's a change, and that's
one spot.
It
right.
reduces the crime rate too. Every time someone is off the streets doing something constructive and positive, it's good
Impacts
for all of us. And
Yeah, I used to tell people all the time, man, I got to get up in the morning. I can't steal that car with y'all. man. I
exactly
got a
right. It's
job,
like,
man.
yo, I got a job, I got things to
I
do. I
gotta get
have
up
too
in the
much to
morning,
lose,
B.
right?
Too
When
much
you
to
have
lose.
things to lose, like
Yeah.
for me, I have a son, I got a lot of things going on. It's just certain things I have no interest
Me, I
in.
just when I started at
You know?
15, I just wanted them free concert tickets and get in that club and get that cash every
That was
weekend.
something to lose.
But you were still working, yeah.
I know we're closing out, but I just want to say that when we talk about solutions, right? Here's a white woman from Staten Island who says, "Look,
I
don't
live in
care-
Brooklyn now.
You live,
Had to
Live
get
in
out.
Brooklyn.
Had to get out.
Yeah,
I heard Staten
exactly.
Island got crazy.
Max rose for Congress in
Right.
Staten Island.
that's my own boy. That she decided that, look, I don't care I look differently. I'm from a different place. I'm going to be a part of the solution, right? I'm sure there are people who are saying, look, what are you doing in this work? You know, you don't belong in this work.
Well,
But
she grew up in
that's-
Staten Island where people be going to jail all the time, and they're white people going to jail doing mad crimes.
Well,
and
now-
she was like, "Wait a minute,
Right.
y'all mad at the black people for doing crimes? Y'all doing organized crime in Staten Island."
But I never saw, when I was growing up on Staten Island, first of all, I never saw people of color in my community. And never did I
That is
know about
crazy. In
school
Staten Island-
suspension or any of that other stuff. It was only when I started working down at the courthouse that I saw, there's a bunch of people of color that live on the same island as me, and B, they're all here in the courthouse. And I said, what in the world is going, when you see a 13-year-old in handcuffs, if that doesn't rattle you to your core, I don't know what will, right? And we're not talking about because he murdered his parents or something. We're talking about for a bag of weed or mouthing off to a teacher.
We have a lot of work to do, right? So,
lot.
look, we got something, but it's not.
It's gonna take 10 years for it to be something.
That's exactly right. So we as a community have to stay on top of this. So, for example, one of the things we're worried about is those 16 and 17-year-olds, they're moving out of Rikers Island. They're going to Horizon and Crossroads, right? That's kind of
In 10 years.
well, it's going to happen coming up this year.
I think you're thinking
right?
about closing Rikers.
Closing Rikers.
Closing Rikers.
That's
Got
a
it.
different campaign, right?
We're
Raise
talking
the
about
age
October.
is
Got it.
removing the 16 and 17 years from the adult system.
Got it.
Right? But those facilities will be staffed by docs. So in a sense, you can probably be
Department
moving
of Corrections
right.
employees,
Right. So,
correction officers.
In a sense, the same problem you may have had in Rikers Island can possibly penetrate into
Right,
the new
if
places.
If it ends up being the same thing,
That's
with the same
exactly
kind of
right.
people running it.
Right. So fundings, there is some beef right now going on between the mayor and the governor, and guess who's going to get caught up in the middle of that? Our kids, black and brown kids. So we have to stay vigilant. We have to stay on top of this. Though, look, we got something.
And it could ultimately end up being a bigger mess because terms, obviously, the governor's going to go move on to something else. The mayor's going to move on to something else. And if this doesn't get resolved quickly and there's not a solution, whoever the next regime is,
You don't know
right?
which
You don't
direction
know-
they may
you
go.
don't know which direction.
That's exactly right. And the law is not a law without funding. If there is no resources to implement that law, it's irrelevant. So, lastly, Rosenberg, thank you. Thank you, Laura Stiles. Thank you, Ibra, for the work
Yes,
you guys
thank
And I
you
want
guys.
to keep the conversation going about the mentoring stuff too.
Oh, for sure.
Yes.
That's
Like that.
it's crucial. That's crucial. It's very
We're
important.
kind of like stalkers. Now
All
you
right,
guys
good.
are in. We're going to follow up.
I mean, look, you wouldn't even let us leave, so I understand. Thank you guys.
You guys give it up for
Thank you.
Dana and Jim. Check
Yes.
out this book, A Stone of Hope, and we'll be giving more information on their programs and all that. Just stay tuned.